Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling a question that seems like it should be settled by science, something we understood centuries ago. But for some, it still sparks incredible conversation and curiosity. Why do some people continue to believe the Earth is flat?
It's a really fascinating topic because, as you point out, the scientific evidence for a spherical Earth is not just overwhelming, it's fundamental to so much of our understanding of the world, in space.
Yeah.
Yet, this idea persists and has seen a strange resurgence.
Absolutely. And we're digging into the material you've shared with us, a collection of historical accounts, analyses of this modern phenomenon, and insights from researchers to help us understand the long, strange history and the recent life of this idea.
Yeah, our mission today is to pull out the key insights hiding in this information, looking at the earliest beliefs about Earth's shape, how our understanding evolved over time, and maybe most importantly, digging into the factors that might contribute to its modern comeback.
Think of this as us guiding you through your own material on a journey through time and information to understand a viewpoint that, while thoroughly disproven by science, still finds curious adherence today. Let's unpack this.
Okay, so to really grasp why anyone might hold on to a flat Earth idea now, we kind of need to look at where the concept began. For much of early human history, across many cultures, the most common view was indeed that the Earth was flat.
Right. I'm picturing those ancient civilizations in the Near East, places like Egypt, Mesopotamia, ancient Israel. What did they envision?
Often the picture was of like a disk floating on water, usually with a solid dome or firmament above it as the sky.
A solid sky.
Yeah, like a ceiling. Even the famous Homeric account from the 8th century BC described okeanos, a vast body of water surrounding a circular Earth surface. It's quite a common ancient motif.
And early Greek thinkers weren't immediately thinking globe either, were they?
No, not at all initially. Some of the pre-Socratics also proposed flat models. Thales, for instance, thought Earth floated on water like a log.
Like a log, okay.
Anaximander saw it as a short cylinder with a flat top. Anaximenes believed it was flat and simply rode on air, much like the sun and moon appear to him.
So definitely not a sphere floating in the void of space yet. What about beliefs outside that region? Did the material cover that?
Yeah, it points to ancient Chinese belief, which for a very long time saw the Earth as flat and square, while the heavens were round.
Flat and square, interesting.
Right, and this view is remarkably stable, virtually unquestioned, until Western ideas arrived much later in the 17th century.
Wow.
And then you had Northern European beliefs, like Norse and Germanic cosmography, also depicting a flat Earth disk surrounded by an ocean, often anchored by like a world tree or pillar in the center. So yeah, the flat model was widespread and persistent.
Okay, so flat Earth was the prevailing view for millennia in many places. When did that monumental shift towards understanding it as a sphere really begin?
That significant change really took root in ancient Greece. Philosophers like Pythagoras in the 6th century BC and later Parmenides in the 5th century BC were among the first to suggest the Earth might be spherical, maybe for aesthetic or philosophical reasons initially.
But Aristotle seems like the one who brought in actual observations to back that up, around 330 BC.
Exactly. Aristotle was crucial because he provided empirical evidence you could actually see. He observed Earth's curved shadow cast on the moon during lunar eclipses. It was always, a segment of a circle.
Ah, right. That makes sense.
He also noted that as you travel north or south, different stars become visible and others disappear below the horizon. This only really makes sense if you are moving across a curved surface.
And then came Eratosthenes with that legendary calculation of Earth's size. That's amazing.
Yes, around 240 BC, Eratosthenes performed what's become a classic experiment. By measuring the angle of shadows cast by sticks or pillars at noon on the same day in two different locations, Syene and Alexandria, he saw they were different.
Because if it were flat.
The angles should have been the same. Exactly. The difference in the shadow angles proved the Earth's curvature and allowed him to estimate its circumference with, remarkable accuracy for the time.
That's incredible ingenuity using such simple observations. What other everyday things supported the spherical model back then?
A very common one, and one that's still easy to observe, is seeing the top of a ship's mast appearing over the horizon before the hull comes into view. That classic example.
Right. The ship sailing over the curve.
Exactly. Also, the observation that other celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, the visible planets, all appear spherical in shape. It seemed reasonable, perhaps, that Earth might be similar.
And this idea of a spherical Earth, it began to spread beyond the Greek world. Slowly, I imagine.
It did, yeah. Your material shows it spread and was largely accepted in learned circles. By the early Christian period, the spherical view was widely held among Christian authors, with very few exceptions, actually.
So not really a conflict with early Christianity then.
Mostly not, no. And in the Islamic world, while some traditionalists might have clung to a flat view, most Islamic scholars from the 9th century onwards tended towards the spherical model.
Okay.
As we noted earlier, it took until the 17th century, through Jesuit missionaries, for the spherical idea to firmly reach China. So the spread varied quite a bit.
Okay, before we jump to the modern day, there's this really persistent myth out there about the Middle Ages that the sources make a point of addressing. The whole Columbus sailed to prove the Earth wasn't flat thing.
Yes, the idea that medieval Europeans widely believed the Earth was flat is actually a historical myth, a misconception that gained traction much, much later.
Where did that idea even come from? It feels so ingrained.
The sources suggest it was largely a narrative created in the 17th century, partly used by Protestants as a way to argue against the perceived backwardness of Catholic teachings. Sort of a propaganda tool, maybe?
So, despite how it's often depicted, most educated people during the Middle Ages understood the Earth was a sphere.
Absolutely. Your material is clear on this. Most scholars in the Middle Ages, including those whose works were readily available to explorers like Columbus, understood the Earth was spherical. Medieval university lectures regularly presented evidence for a spherical Earth.
Though I imagine it's harder to know what the average person in a village might have thought. Like, did it even matter to their daily life?
That's true. That's a fair point. While intellectual circles were aligned with sphericity, the sources mention that some vernacular texts used language that might imply a round like a table shape rather than round like an apple, suggesting that outside of scholarly contexts, understanding might have been less precise or maybe just not a pressing concern.
Right.
But the myth of the flat Earth, believed by scholars in the Middle Ages, is just that, a myth.
Okay, so science has had this settled for centuries, confirmed by every measurement, observation, photo from space, global navigation, I mean, everything. With that overwhelming evidence, how in the world has this scientifically disproven idea seen a noticeable resurgence, especially in the last decade or so? This is where the material you've provided gets really interesting about the why now.
Exactly. This is the core puzzle of the modern phenomenon, isn't it? The sources point to several key interconnected factors driving this resurgence. It's not just one thing.
And technology, specifically social media, seems absolutely central to it, doesn't it? It feels like the main engine.
It's arguably the most significant enabler. Platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and they've made it incredibly easy not just to spread disproven ideas rapidly, but crucially, to connect individuals who hold these beliefs.
So it's less about convincing everyone and more about finding and building these online communities around the idea.
Precisely. Researchers describe it as an online flat Earth ecosystem. YouTube, in particular, acts as a central content hub, almost like an alternative documentary channel for this community.
Alternative documentary channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
It offers immediacy and sense of intimacy. People can easily find videos, testimonials, and arguments that confirm their existing doubts or beliefs, creating these powerful echo chambers.
That makes chilling sense. If you're starting to question mainstream ideas, maybe feeling a bit isolated, you can instantly find a ready-made group of people online who validate that questioning and offer you a whole alternative framework.
And that ties directly into another major driver the sources identify, a significant and growing distrust of traditional experts and institutions.
The classic gatekeepers of knowledge, like scientists, academics, governments.
Yes. There's increasing skepticism towards academics, scientists, government agencies like NASA, and the mainstream media. This widespread distrust makes people more open, perhaps, to alternative explanations for anything, even those that fly in the face of established evidence and scientific consensus.
So for some, believing the Earth is flat isn't just about geology or physics. It's maybe a way to express that distrust, to challenge perceived authority, a statement.
The sources definitely link the modern flat Earth movement to broader societal shifts, including a move towards populism, where non-experts or online influencers can sometimes gain more credibility with certain audiences than highly trained specialists.
Because they seem more real or something.
They might be seen as more authentic, perhaps, or less part of a perceived system or establishment.
But, okay, if you believe the Earth is flat, how do you explain things like planes flying in straight lines across continents, GPS or photos from space or satellites? I mean, the evidence for a sphere is literally everywhere in modern life.
This is where conspiracy theories become absolutely essential to the modern flat Earth belief system. To reconcile their belief with the overwhelming daily evidence of a spherical world, believers often embrace the idea of a massive global conspiracy.
A conspiracy involving who? Everyone.
Essentially, yeah. Your material suggests the belief tends to be that governments, scientists, airlines, map makers, educators, perhaps everyone in a position of authority are colluding in a vast deception to hide the true flat shape of the Earth from the public.
Wow.
It's the only way in their framework to explain why everyone else says it's a sphere and why all the evidence seems to point that way. It has to be faked.
Wow. That elevates it from just a scientific disagreement to believing you're privy to this enormous secret the rest of the world is either fooled by or actively hiding. That's quite a leap.
It is. And another related factor is an emphasis on personal observation, but often coupled with a deep distrust of observations made by others, especially institutions.
So if I didn't see it myself.
Exactly. Things like photos from space, evidence of curvature seen from high-altitude weather balloons, or complex satellite data might be dismissed because they didn't witness it themselves, or they simply believe the evidence is fabricated as part of the grand conspiracy.
That seems like an incredibly difficult standard to apply. If you want to understand anything beyond your immediate surroundings, how could you learn history or science or anything?
It is. It creates a very self-contained worldview. And there's an interesting idea the sources touch on about social media use itself, that people using these platforms primarily for entertainment can sometimes become what one researcher called affect addicts.
Affect addicts, meaning emotional response.
Yeah, constantly seeking strong emotional responses like anger, excitement, or maybe feeling superior by being in on something others aren't. Misinformation, especially when it's wrapped up in a dramatic conspiracy narrative, is incredibly effective at providing those kinds of emotional hits.
And we've seen this bleed into public consciousness, right? Like that YouGov poll suggesting a notable percentage of young Americans aren't sure the Earth is round, even if very few firmly believe it's flat, or certain celebrities publicly endorsing the idea. It gets attention.
Yes, it definitely gets attention. And the sources even mention the common misuse of the UN logo as supposed evidence for a flat Earth map.
Oh, right. The one that looks like a flat circle with the continents?
Exactly. Cartographers explain it's simply an azimuthal equidistant projection. It's just one way to represent a 3D sphere on a 2D surface centered on the North Pole for a specific mapping purpose, like showing air routes. It's not, evidence of the Earth's physical shape at all.
It's a map, not a model of reality.
Right. But it's an example of misunderstanding or misrepresenting a technical representation as literal proof, often seen online.
So some flat earthers might claim they're just being skeptics, applying something like Cartesian doubt, questioning everything to find truth. How do we differentiate that from, well, just ignoring overwhelming evidence?
That's a really critical distinction, isn't it? While questioning is absolutely fundamental to science and understanding, true critical thinking is based on evaluating information from reliable sources and following where the evidence leads. Your material highlights that checking what mainstream scientific agencies, academic institutions, and established media say is a good starting point.
Not necessarily believing them blindly, but seeing what the consensus based on evidence is.
Precisely. Because there's a significant amount of time, rigorous work, peer review, and consistent evidence behind widely accepted scientific understanding, like the shape of the Earth. It's built up over centuries.
It's not just some random opinion someone cooked up yesterday.
Exactly. It's a conclusion built on centuries of cumulative observation, measurement, testing, and correction by countless people across the globe. Rejecting that vast body of evidence isn't really skepticism in the scientific sense. It's closer to denialism.
Okay, so pulling all this together from the material you've shared with us, what does understanding this whole phenomenon mean for you, the listener? Why should we care about this?
Well, I think looking at the flat Earth resurgence really highlights several crucial things about our world today. It certainly shows the immense power of information and, unfortunately, misinformation in the digital age. Ideas, even those long disproven, can gain new life and spread incredibly quickly through technology.
It absolutely underscores the vital importance of critically evaluating where you get your information from, especially what you encounter online. Not everything that looks like a documentary or sounds like an expert is actually rooted in solid evidence. We have to be discerning.
For sure. And it demonstrates how broader societal factors like distrust in institutions, maybe shifts towards populist thinking, and even the ways we emotionally engage with content online can make people vulnerable to accepting alternative realities, even those that contradict fundamental observed facts about the world around us.
So we've journeyed from ancient conceptions of Earth as like a disk floating on water to the modern online communities actively debating its shape today. We've seen how the understanding evolved scientifically, how a myth about the Middle Ages was created and kind of propagated, and explored the complex modern roots of this belief in things like distrust, social media dynamics, and the architecture of conspiracy thinking.
Yeah. And while the science itself is undeniably clear and settled, understanding why some people still cling to this idea offers fascinating and I think important insights into human psychology, how information spreads in our connected era, and the complex dynamics of societal trust today. It's about more than just geometry.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me thinking about this. If seeing the curvature of the Earth from a high altitude weather balloon, if the undeniable evidence from global circumnavigation and the Hellite technology, if the sheer consistency of astronomical observations from any point on the globe isn't enough to sway someone, what kind of evidence, if any, could possibly penetrate and change a belief system that seems so deeply rooted not just in a different view of physics, but in a fundamental distrust of the very sources of knowledge itself? That's something for you to think about.